They agreed on having a trip to Italy the next year, signing a contract for $3.4 million. It was this cascade of just random things, and nobody stepped in the way.
Matthew and Rob are the security and compliance leaders showing community health centers how to deploy AI safely.
AI is already there. It's already there from using Copilot, if you're using Gemini, using the Re.ai to transcribe meeting minutes to notes, using Siri, using any type of the Android platforms or anything. It's already there. So the kind of the cat's out of the bag.
In your mind, what does real AI governance look like inside a community health center?
AI does not belong in IT. AI belongs at the executive level. It belongs at the leadership level because you are the ones responsible to ensure that the guardrails are in place.
What are the dangers of getting too complicit with AI over time?
The biggest danger is that you have AI talking to AI. That's going to be your biggest danger, because if one hallucinates and causes the other to hallucinate, it can cascade into a much bigger issue.
What is the first mistake organizations make when adopting AI?
Well, the first mistake is thinking it's just going to solve all the problems. And I just turned it on and off it goes. That's the first mistake, until it hallucinates, and then you've got a mess to clean up an incident.
You can ask it anything you want, and it'll just give you the answer. And so if you ask it to tell you the personal details of the person registered to the OpenClaw instance, it will just do that.
All right, it's 2 past, so let's go ahead and get started here. Welcome to the AI in the Safety Net webinar series sponsored by RainTech, an MSP service provider with clients across the country, and THRIVE, a consulting team of individuals who come from community health centers. Today's session is about building safe and responsible AI infrastructure. And really the focus is going to be diving into the technical and regulatory guardrails that need to be in place in order to pursue AI and to roll out effective and safe AI. I'm Bill France, president and founder of THRIVE. I'll be moderating today's session. I have over 15 years experience working as part of and with health center leadership teams. And prior to that, I have about 20 years experience in other nonprofits, including working for an acute care division of a large health system and also as CFO of a large foundation as well. But with that, the two important folks in the room are our presenters, and I'd like them to introduce themselves. And so Matthew is the Chief Information Security Officer at RainTech. And Matthew, can you take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for RainTech. I provide the security services for a large number of community health centers scattered around Colorado, and provide other services for a lot of other organizations, ranging from industries in healthcare to construction, entertainment facilities, whatever basically in the industry that needs help. I'm willing to help them. I also have my own podcast. It's called the I T'd Myself podcast. It's a very lighthearted approach to educating everybody on cybersecurity, technology, and IT tasks. So mainly focused towards folks who own their own businesses or are in a leadership position in their own business. And this is, I've been here for about 8 year. I've been doing IT for the last 15. Before that, I was a black belt associated with a Fortune 500 company building out facilities and supply chain management. So that's the world I come from.
Terrific. Thank you, Matthew. And I'd like to introduce Rob. Rob is the co-founder and CEO of VanRein, where he works a lot in the areas of compliance and among other things. And Rob, can you take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you all for having us. I'm Rob Buskirk, co-founder and CEO of VanRein Compliance. We're founded, we're going on 9 years. Yeah, 9 years this year. We focus on auditing everything from HIPAA compliance frameworks to all the NIST standards, ISO 27001, 42001, and beyond, all the way to SOC 2 and high trust. We also put together a robust LMS for our clients. So obviously education is a big part of what we do at VanRein as well. So when you have when we go in and do auditing, we're also able to provide a full robust training session for our clients' teams so they understand how to handle health information accordingly. We've now branched out into, obviously, the last couple of years into AI governance, which we're going to touch on here today, which is really important to understand how does an organization bring AI in. And so we're going through and doing quite a bit of AI audits, from a governance audit and the NIST standards to 42001, and now our high trust clients are adding on the high trust AI stack, which is fun. And yes, since we're plugging podcasts, Matthew, good job. We have our VRC VanRein Compliance podcast as well, where we had last 2 weeks we've had Benny Cleveland, our CISO and auditor, on, and then we had Dr. Camille Howard to talk about HR ethics around AI, because there's an ethical part. And just excited to be here and go through the session today.
Yeah, and I'd like to encourage everybody to check out both Matthew and Rob's podcasts. I was thinking about starting my own, but I'm not sure I can do it as well as they do. So we'll see. The jury's out on that.
You can always have a guest, right?
Yep. But what I'd like to do is really frame this session. Why does this session matter today? This is session number 4 in a series about really building out AI in the safety net. And in previous sessions, we've really talked about operational and clinical tools. And what we really want to do today is elevate the discussion from really a technical and tools discussion about what can AI do to really talk about AI governance and the infrastructure. In health centers, AI is not just about innovation. It's really the clinical experience, but it's also compliance. It's also risk, both financial and reputational and otherwise. And there needs to be an infrastructure in place that needs to precede deployment. And this is where Rob and Matthew can really, I think, help folks out as far as defining what that looks like. So the question isn't, whether health centers should be using AI, because that's where healthcare is going, but it's really how to use it safely. So really, AI success in a community health center isn't just about what model do I choose. It's about compliance, governance, setting up guardrails, and doing it in a way that protects your patients, your organization, your staff, your board, your leadership, etc. So with that, I'd like to start with really kind of a high-level governance discussion. And I'd like to really just start with Rob and say, in your mind, what does real AI governance look like inside a community health center?
That's great question. Well, first of all, AI is already there. It's already there from using Copilot. If you're using Gemini, using the re.ai to transcribe meeting minutes to notes. You're using Siri, using any type of the Android platforms or anything. It's already there. So the kind of the cat's out of the bag. But what we like to do is you need to first start with why. Why do we need this AI plugin from Epic or some other EMR, right? Because everybody's going to sell your organization their AI. You've already been pitched, you've already seen it, and they're gonna promise all these things. But you want to first start with why. Why do I need this AI? What is it going to solve? What is the problem it's going to solve? Say there's a billing issue. Say there's there's a denial of service issues, or there's a reimbursement problem. Okay, maybe that'll solve that. First thing we say, okay, now we know what the problem is going to be, why you need it. Now you need a governance plan, and meaning like how is AI going to be vetted? How are we going to basically build a risk register of the AI platforms, and where is that data going? Is it stateside? Is it offshore? Where is that data going? And then making sure you have all of the regulatory pieces in place as well, from business associate agreements to master service agreements and all of that. Those are all key pieces. Now, once you get the kind of the legalese piece done, and all of that, don't just throw it to IT. It's not an IT problem. IT always gets dumped everything. I've done a lot of technology. I've done it for a long time before we started our own firm. And I've done everything from getting the company vehicles oil changed to rotate tires to pizza to plumbing. And AI does not belong in IT. AI belongs at the executive level. It belongs at the leadership level because you are the ones responsible to ensure that the guardrails are in place. You're also legally responsible. Just because for anything that goes awry with the AI, it does hallucinate. One thing to always remember is it doesn't matter what new technology we get. The laws that we have been there for a while, and they are still the laws. And you will be held accountable, not only from a government standpoint, but more importantly, your patients, the people you care for, have enough information and have the tools that they need to open an incident with the Office of Civil Rights, HHS, and go through that. So we start there. So once you get the stakeholders built in and they are brought in and they've committed to it, it's then the education piece. You need to teach your teams, okay, if you're going to be a Copilot shop, great, go all in on that. If you're going to have some Gemini or some Claude or another one or build your own, let your teams know what they can and cannot use. Because that if you don't do that, then what happens is you're chasing all these bots everywhere. And when AI becomes more and more agentic, you need to know where that data is going. So that's kind of how we look at it here at VanRein.
Great. And Matthew, I'm curious from your perspective, one of the things that we talk about with AI, or for at least for folks like me, who are don't work in AI, in IT day after day, I keep hearing the term pause authority, and I keep hearing the term humans in the loop. Mm-hmm. And as a chief security officer, what does that mean to you, and what protections does that give an organization?
Well, so as part of your governance program, however you have that adopted within your organization, you need to have some capacity to review what decisions are being made. There have been a lot of stories very, very recently of AI hallucinating key facts that an entire business has based their strategic plan off of. And if you don't have somebody error checking or analyzing and sanity checking that information, things can go off the rails very quickly. And so human in the loop is basically the concept of you have somebody there who's making a decision based off of what the AI is telling them, but they also have the ability, the prompting to be able to respond to that data and review it for sanity. To make sure that the numbers make sense, to make sure they fit the data that is already there, and also to make sure they're real. Like you can have an AI, and AI can not carry the one, just like a human can. This is very possible. It may not be as error prone as some humans, but it is just as error prone in the long run over a long enough time span. So when you spot errors as you check this, or if you spot things that are wrong or don't necessarily add up, you need to have somebody who can make the call to stop AI and also proceed to the workflow through a normal non-agentic workflow until you can analyze what exactly has happened with the AI. Basically identify where there's a step, where something went wrong, and who can stop that. Make sure you have somebody there to do that for you, and whose job it is to say, yeah, we need to pull the plug on this just for this time period, and make sure you give yourself some time and have a defined period. Don't just say pause it. Have a defined period for how long you're going to pause it, when you're going to come back to it, when you're going to analyze it, because so many organizations have this, oh, well, we paused it, so now we just never going to use it again. They have that sort of scare tactic, or they don't feel like any error is acceptable, so they have to stop everything at the first sign of trouble, and that's not the case. This is something that we should always try to be working towards and working through. It's an imperfect system, just like any system built by humans, any system by man. So always have the capacity, an escape hatch, if you will, to drop out and pull things back and review for human consistency, and vet. Again, you brought it up at the top. We want to be able to vet these things, and if there's something that needs some additional vetting or some additional error checking, that's that's an opportunity to do this. This is where we can pause it and review.
And what's funny about this is that, my initial reaction when you guys were talking was, wait, what about the infrastructure? What about health centers currently having the infrastructure in place? But a lot of the things you're describing are already happening in a health center, I think, through their quality assurance and quality improvement programs.
Absolutely. And that Rob hit on it. Whether or not you believe you're using AI currently, you are. One of the most popular provider use tool for transcription is Dragon. Dragon uses an AI platform. Whether or not you knew that, it is using an AI platform to do some of that work. And a lot of other transcription services, 90% of them are using that as well. And whether or not you believe that or whether or not you knew that, that's AI in use. And so you're currently in the process of using this, whether or not you know it. Having vetted it and understanding what you're using is going to be key moving forward. And so absolutely understanding those processes.
So, Rob, I had a question for you then. Based on using the example of Dragon, as you talk about developing AI and customized AI, it seems that some of these platforms that are out there already, your vendor has to worry about compliance. They have to worry about these guardrails. What are your thoughts on that? It just seems like an easier take.
Well, first of all, you can't just put that blame on. You can't just hook everything from certifications to AI governance on your vendor or strategic partner, right? Say it's the EMR or it's Amazon or it's Microsoft, it's GCP or something like that nature. First of all of those platforms are legally protected internally because they're going to call themselves as conduits. They're just a highway of information. The way the laws are written and the way everything from laws, frameworks to SOC, ISO, high trust, it's all the organization's responsibility. So the business itself has to have the AI governance. It has to have the policies, procedures, and training in place to be able to manage and properly manage the AI and properly protect the data. And then they have to go vet the vendors. You always have to have vendor vetting. That's why you have like a risk register. You list out all of your vendors, you look at the risk to the organization. It's your responsibility. Gone are the days, I know about 10 years ago, probably just like, oh, we'll put it to Amazon and it'll be fine. Somebody else will deal with it. No, that kind of worked for a couple of years, but the large companies are not going to hold the bag. It's you who's responsible for that, and that's how the law is written, because that hasn't changed. And then that's what your patients expect too. They expect you to protect their data and their trust.
Yeah, and so that goes along with really no different than how centers are operating now, right? They're responsible for their PHI. They're responsible for understanding how that's isolated and what the downstream risk of use of that data is, that information, as well as being compliant with HIPAA. If there's a breach, usually it's the health center that's responsible, not the EMR vendor, right?
When there's a breach, yes, there will be a breach.
Yeah, good point.
Yep.
So along that lines, from Matthew, from your perspective, when you talk about AI and protecting patient information, are there added risks with AI as opposed to other technical platform? Regular EMR platforms is the way that we're used to it a couple years ago?
Well, so yes and no. The added risks are that the technology is different and that you have to maintain an understanding of how that workflow is occurring and where that information is being processed. There is an additional risk in that just because one organization may be taking your data, they're not who is actually processing it. So you do have to understand what the data flow looks like on your side. But from a reality perspective, the risk is actually the same if you follow proper vetting responses in your HIPAA assessment. So if you're doing a risk register and you're very diligent about adding and vetting vendors as you add them, then the risk becomes the added risk becomes negligible because you're aware of where the data is going. You can analyze that flow, and you have the capacity to identify where data flows to who, and where there might be a potential issue. And that is really kind of the first step is having that risk register and making sure that you're vetting that stuff appropriately, to then move the identifiers, move the data appropriately within the structures of that AI. The risk, again, it's only riskier in the fact that if you don't understand what it's doing, that's a problem. You need to know what it's doing. You need to have that plan.
Understood. And I guess a follow-up question that I had with that is in regards to, these are large commitments dollar-wise and time-wise to implement these systems. And both from a vendor standpoint and from a health center standpoint, what types of contractual relationships? I mean, what comes to mind is there's a EMR vendor out there that always wants to lock into X number of years, and usually we can negotiate them down to Y. It seems like locking into architecture or single platform may have some risk too, as far as being able to elevate your AI and to be able to govern it to a certain extent.
That's true. Yeah. If you think about how Copilot is ingrained with Office, it's almost inseparable. You can't use Office without having Copilot. It's there. And you're absolutely right. With other EMR vendors, other EHR vendors, they're going to have their AI in there, and it may be impossible for you to separate that. That's 100% accurate.
Yep.
Rob, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm always for building my own thing. I mean, that's me. Then I can control it, right? So you're better off building internal large language models to work with the data and solve the problems. But obviously, all the large vendors are going to want to sell you theirs. The key that I'm finding, and there are some benefits to that because they're going to maintain it, they're going to update it. It's going to be unique to their workflows. But the one thing I'm seeing is a lot of the platforms that we're auditing, the AI portions are excluded from the business associate agreements because they are not compliant the way they're being leveraged. So I haven't seen one yet fully that says I could use AI in all areas of the platform. Maybe it's just a little bit of the billing. Maybe it's just a little bit of contact management. Maybe it's a little bit of patient management, but it's not everything. So the key point of that is anytime the sales guy or gal, which they do every day, sends you, hey, we have this new AI bot. It's amazing. It'll save you 20 hours a week. It'll cut your response time in 20% and save your money, save 40% off your quarterly budget. And you say, where can the AI be used, and is it covered under the business associate agreement? And that's the trigger, and they'll go yes or no. Because just be very careful where everything is, because it's everybody's got the bot, right? They just want to sell you the bot.
Well, this reminds me of a few years back when there were a billion vendors out there selling remote monitoring equipment and remote medical devices, where everybody jumped on the bandwagon. And so I do have a sensitivity to that, because I've had clients with varying results from that. And it sounds like AI is in kind of potentially could be in the same place.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And just like that scenario, it can be implemented both well and poorly. I'm currently dealing with I'm currently dealing with a health center whose AI integration, their EMR is forcing them into an AI integration, and that AI integration is 100% vulnerable. There is a critical CVE associated with this AI implementation. And the healthcare center has a very difficult time of scaling that back because now it is tied into that EMR. And so you're absolutely right. The only way that we can possibly prevent that is by shutting off that access in the EMR itself, which, depending on your vendor, may or may not be the case.
Yeah.
All right. Here's something that just before we got on, I decided to go into ChatGTP, and I asked it to answer it as ChatGTP to say, if you were me, what would be one question around protecting an organization or protecting a health center that you would ask a group of professionals? And it came back with, give us one example of where a community health center should absolutely not remove human review, which I thought was a little funny because it sounds like you guys have more than one example.
Let you go first, Rob.
Oh yes, the human review. We don't need the humans, Bill. You know, we need to learn how to work with it, right? You can't lose that human in the loop. That's a big piece. It's a key piece. And there's also a struggle from leadership that is getting pressure by board. And if they're public companies, I'm kind of going a little bit bigger here, but if they're public companies, getting pushed by stakeholders and shareholders to reduce costs. So executives want to cut cost, which usually means cutting processes or, unfortunately, sometimes people. And then the people in the front lines that are actually doing the service, they're like, I need a tool to help do my job, and I just eliminate the roles. You've got to have that panic button if it gets to that point, and before you have that decision point. There's also the insurance carrier side to all this. Insurance carriers do run a majority of all the health plans, as we know, especially on the insurance side. They're going to start requiring AI review and governance before they make claims, before they pay a claim. And so they're going to say, okay, Rob went in for a surgery. Did AI verify that Dr. Franz here did the proper procedure and under the allotted amount of time and use the proper procedure and process? And why is the bill 10 grand and should it be 4 grand? So AI is going to be heavily into that area. And then they're also going to give incentives for centers that are using AI to vet and verify diagnosis, health plans, and payments. But you still are going to need that human in the loop. It's still the verification of, is it doing the right thing? Does it look right? Because even in your use of GBT or Copilot or Gemini, you can look at it and go, okay, that doesn't sound just right, or that doesn't sound like you. That doesn't sound like the way I would present that, and make sure it looks legitimate. So,
all right. And that really goes in line with kind of our theme of previous sessions, which is AI as a human amplifier, not a replacement.
There you go.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing that I want to do, and this is not what we're talking about here, is go to the doctor and have AI make a decision about my healthcare, right? They can help the clinician, but not dictate a course of treatment. So I think that's an important point. We're talking about human amplification here, not human replacement.
Correct.
So
yeah.
Maybe we can dig a little bit deeper into some specific topics here that I have on my mind. And one of them is really, we've talked about, I think, Rob, you mentioned, or Matthew mentioned hallucinations. How do you detect those in clinical and compliance workflow? Like, can there be a creep with the AI with these hallucinations, or how do you generally approach that in healthcare or really any industry in these workflows?
So that is where human in the loop is key. Honestly, you're going to find a scenario where we'll say one of the use cases of AI is to review the charting of a patient and come up with a care plan. Now, that is something that AI should never actually have authority over, is that care plan. Because one of the things it can see is it can see an elevated heart rate or, some indicator of patient distress, decide that it's a cardiac problem when it's actually just a gastro problem, and completely misdiagnose the patient. And so that is part of what makes AI hallucinations so difficult? And one of those things that you need to vet on the front end before you get AI into the infrastructure to make those decisions is understanding how those decisions are being made, because there are two types of decision processes being made inside of AI. There is reward based, where the AI is really just trying to find whatever it can to answer the question. And so if you answer something, if you tell ChatGPT it's wrong, it's just going to agree with you. It's going to be like, yeah, I'm totally wrong. You're right. Absolutely. And it's going to continue to do that because you can force it to hallucinate. But then there's also what is called conditional rewarding, and where the AI is reviewing the information as it's being fed it to then sanity check that portion of the data and then provide an answer that is more complete and more thorough. Currently, right now, there is no model that does that. So there is something to be said about that. But moving past that to identify those hallucinations, really the only way that you're going to do that is have some sort of methodology on the back end to sanity check the answers that you're getting from AI, whether it be human in the loop, whether it be a Boolean test like workflow that analyzes the data and says, does this match what I'm being fed? Any combination of such things. You can implement those controls to ensure that you're seeing those hallucinations before they result in a consequential decision being made that is incorrect.
Yeah.
Understood. So really the way that I look at that is this isn't just a quantitative analysis of data when you're looking at these things either. It's really this positive reinforcement. I mean, you want a clinician looking at clinical data. You want, somebody who is very familiar with the front end desk, looking at any type of automation that's happening there. You want that's the human in the loop you've talked about.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is for Matthew or Rob. I think an important item for health centers, really all health center staff, and more importantly, health center patients, are population biases. We're dealing with underserved populations, and it could be economically disadvantaged. It could be minority populations. How do you detect bias in this AI decision-making process or data evaluation?
Yeah, that's that HR piece, right? That's that governance piece that's tough. The first thing is you need to teach the AI. You need to teach it how you organization, what is bias to the organization? Is it sex? Is it race? Is it religion? Is it some other sort? Also, does it meet the federal and state guidelines and laws of what discrimination is and all of that? Because there's different tones. Like you can go to every different platform and you'll get a different tone or different response of everything. If you ask something religious, it'll give all three platforms will give you a different response. So I think the key is really teaching and getting it to understand how the organization works, and then having someone verify that, like, to the point, for example, we leveraging AI for auditing. So what we do is we will throw in all different types of questions from sex, religion, different type, backgrounds, nationalities, and see what it does. What does it come back with? Say, hey, and then we're able to fine tune that. So this is where you need the testing. You need to really see, you need to test it before it hallucinates, because if a patient or nurse or provider gets a wrong response that's inappropriate, then there could be an HR is civil liability there that you have to deal with, because ultimately you still have the liability.
To piggyback on that, the thing that this is where being able to use your own AI or something you've built in house or something that's been built explicitly for you is really key, because the thing that you're going to want to know about your AI is how are they oversampling the data, because that is how you remove bias from an AI platform, is you oversample data or you undersample data based on how prevalent that information is within the training model that you're using. And so if you have a model that's being built for you, you can dictate those parameters. You really can. And that's where the power of getting that information. And to maybe directly answer your question, having an AI decision log, like having it give you its reasoning for every answer it provides, having some sort of analysis log for you to review, is a perfect way to identify those biases before they become problems.
So that's no different from my role when I was a CFO. If somebody came in with an analysis and sat in front of me, they would present the information and we'd have a discussion, and I'd ask them questions about what were your assumptions? Why did you move in this direction? And really having that decision-making sequencing or log, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but it's a discussion with a machine, essentially. But it's still, there really isn't much of a difference there.
No, that's exactly what you're doing when you have that logging information and you have that parameter identification. You're having the AI tell you how it came to the decision it's getting to, and that's the important piece of building an AI, a large language model that you own or that you have the ownership of, because then you have the rights to that. If you are building something, if you're buying a product, you may not have that decision-making tracking for you or exposed to you. And so you being able to troubleshoot that's going to be a lot harder than if it were built in-house.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me because we have 1,400 health centers across the country. We don't have 50 or 25. Because they're dealing with unique populations with their own unique needs within that community or within that population. And so the models that we build, we want to make sure are specific to what our goal is, our mission, which is serving that particular community or those particular populations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can even, I think this is probably the best example I could give is we leverage Intercom as our chatbot on our website. Intercom is very good at getting very granular. Like I can get down to the response from a religious standpoint, to a regional standpoint, to international countries, to different languages, to all of that, and it can be very fine tuned to have a great customer experience. Likewise, in the health centers, you could have an AI for nursing versus surgery versus billing, right? Yeah, I mean, and there is some cases that you will need to know, the sex and maybe even religion of the patient, so you can provide the best care. So you have to craft those and give those guardrails to each of those. So you could almost have different bots for different areas, not all just one. So
terrific. Well, this is clarifying a lot of things for me. Because it's overwhelming for a lot of folks. And, I think a lot of us are used to dealing with AI through a vendor, but we know that the progression in the use of AI is going to keep accelerating. And it's going to be a useful tool and a necessary tool. But this is really putting light to a lot of kind of unknowns that I had in my mind. So, as we talk about closing out the session before we get to the Q&A, I have a basic question, which is, if my health center really doesn't have we have zero AI governance in place. We don't have any AI governance, and we're just relying, let's say, on our vendors. What's the sequencing that we should follow before we deploy any more tools? Can we kind of recap that?
Well, it's start with governance. It's either your internal or your external compliance partner. It's the compliance team internally, whoever has that. If it's the Matthews, if it's the CISOs, if it is in IT, we need to say, okay, what is this going to do? How is it going to make our lives better? How is it going to help the organization? And also, what's the compute cost? What's the credits of all this? and really making sure that whatever you bring in fits in the guardrails of the organization and provides that value. Because another big issue is the data leak. We're seeing a lot of AI just scrape data, and then someone didn't, they set it up, but they didn't know the data was also being shared publicly. So then that's a breach. And you need to look at all the tick boxes and ask the questions and then turn it on. And then also educate your staff is getting inundated with AI this, AI that, like on their phones all the time. And everybody like, I'll just try a 7-day trial of this. It's like, yeah, no, let's not do that from a technical standpoint and DLP standpoint. You can block a lot of things down. However, it's really up to the organization to make sure to educate the team. How do we handle this? We don't want to stifle the innovation, but we want to keep it within those guardrails.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, you need somebody in your leadership who is first identified as the person who's going to sort of own your AI plan. You need some champion there to sort of lead that charge in your leadership, so that it comes from the top down. And then you need a guideline for how you want to implement AI where you have it. And also, like Rob said, you deploying your compliance toolkits and your guardrails really comes as almost a third or fourth step, because you have decisions to make before that. What is acceptable? What are we willing to do? What are we willing to allow our users, our providers to use this for? And those decisions really should be made before you journey down the line of, well, let's just use AI. Let's just use it.
Yeah.
And so it really sounds like we need to be doing a few things here. Obviously, we've talked a lot about governance and oversight and guardrails today. And part of that is really classifying the risk. We need to have risk stratification within our system of rolling it out AI, as well as not only just reviewing those kind of third-party vendor standards as we're evaluating technology, evaluating ourselves in-house, what are our own standards, and then equally importantly, how are we going to monitor and audit these functions within the organization? It's really, when we talk about AI, there's so much discussion about AI as a tool, as even a human amplifier. But without that governance structure in place, these discipline guardrails, it sounds like you can make a right-hand turn in the wrong direction pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But the opposite side of that too is you don't need a team of AI experts per se. You need a reliable, knowledgeable staff member or partner compliance or security partner involved in this that can help build you out. The perfect example, well, I always say to people, and this was said to me early on in my career when I worked in the finance department of a hospital system, we don't do accounting for our mission. We deliver patient care. And I think that speaks strongly to the point that was made earlier of, this doesn't belong in IT. This belongs with the COO, or this belongs with the leadership team, because it all has to be mission focused. We can't just implement AI to implement AI because everybody's talking about it. Asking the questions that both of you have raised about, what is this going to do? How are we going to deploy it? How is it going to make the patient experience better? Is it going to improve? Could be our efficiencies, could be our bottom line, but most importantly, does it keep the patient safer? Does it provide us more resources so we can continue to reinvest in our mission? And those are the questions we have to be asking. And that's why these initiatives belong both at the leadership level, I think, and within the operational / clinical silo. At health centers, historically, we say there's operations and there's clinical. To me, the two go together because they run hand in hand. All right. Do you have any closing words before we get to, or thoughts before we get to any questions that are out there?
I think the key is the governance piece. From a closing piece, if there are no other questions or anything, happy to answer those questions. But just think of governance. Think of the why first. Think about how are we going to audit the AI, because you will be legally responsible for the implementation of the AI. You got to make sure that it's also valuable. Think of AI as an HR hire. It's an FTE. Like, okay, if this one bot can I bring on one bot, and yes, it could probably take the load off of 3 FTEs. That's a hire. You're going to take the time to hire people. You need to take time to hire the right AI as well.
Yeah, and from a perspective of implementation and governance in creating those guardrails, it's really about making sure that you don't drift from your purpose with AI, and that you identify how you're going to use it explicitly. Not allowing a general use to be deployed across an organization without any control. It's very tempting to be like, okay, it works, let's push it out to everyone. Resist that urge. Definitely allow yourselves to follow your guidelines, your guardrails that you've established before you've deployed this fully. Make sure that you have some methodology of identification and verification and validation and vetting, a lot of E's, to make sure that you have the right solution in the right place.
Terrific. So let's open this up to some questions. Okay, here's the first question, which is a good question. What is the first mistake organizations make when adopting AI? Rob, I'll start with you, and then we'll let Matthew answer that.
Well, the first mistake is thinking it's just going to solve all the problems, and I just turned it on and off it goes. That's the first mistake, until it hallucinates, and then you've got a mess to clean up, an incident. It is AI is kind of where we were with web hosting 10 years ago, where everybody said, we had our computers, and now they all went co-located, right? Which I know RainTech has a site, and then now it's either AWS, GCP, or Microsoft, and then it's probably end up going to be leasing compute down the road. We all kind of had a weird thing with that, but now you don't think twice about starting buying a computer. You'd never buy one. You just lease it up in the cloud. Kind of this is the same way as we all rush to go, oh, we need to do with this AI, but what is it going to do? What is the why? What is it problems actually going to solve? And does my team understand how to handle it and audit appropriately?
Yeah, and I would say something similar, but it's closer to don't fall for the buzzword. Don't fall for the buzzword. It's a buzzword that a lot of people like to use. It's like the cloud, like you said, Rob. The cloud is just somebody else's computer. It's not this magical thing that exists. Literally, just somebody else's computer. And AI is in a lot of ways nothing more than buying somebody else's ability to make decisions. Now you're automating it. You're putting it through a process and a workflow. But really, it's just the decision maker, and treat it like it's somebody outside your organization. It doesn't get implicit trust. You need to vet it. You need to drag that down. The biggest risk is implicit trust, I think, in a lot of that.
Here's another one. What are the dangers of getting too complicit with AI over time?
I'll take this one first, because the biggest danger is that you have AI talking to AI. That's going to be your biggest danger, because if one hallucinates and causes the other to hallucinate, it can cascade into a much bigger issue. So if you overuse it and you're feeding AI information from another AI, and there is errors down the line that nobody is involved in with catching, you're gonna have a situation where you've basically wrecked the decision-making process.
Yep. You have to constantly invest in and teach the AI. Let's be honest. I mean, you don't bring your child home from the hospital and go, all right, baby's good, they'll take care of itself. No, I think this is how I look at AI. You need to raise the child and teach the child and give the child guardrails and teach how the child to eat and all of that. So I know it's a little simplistic, but it's kind of like this. AI is very infant stage now, maybe. And it's like you need to teach it. If you don't teach it, it will learn from all the bad kids in class. And when it becomes more agentic and it's having conversations, it will bring the bad habits from school. The other thing to think about is kind of funny. We haven't talked about this much. Maybe Matthew, you can confirm or deny. Is we're not talking about the dark net as much as we used to. We have to remember the bots are heavy in the dark net. It is still there. I think the safe area of the internet is only 5 or 10% of the internet is still safe, if that. You may know a little bit more, but the AI that you use here to write a great email or a marketing campaign or help me with budgeting or something, or what do I want for dinner, is the same bot that's used on the darknet against you. Yeah. So
it's true. And over reliance. So the big story right now is that there's a new open source tool. It's called OpenClaw, and it's very good personal assistant, but it's very easy for users. It allows users to deploy an AI agent that helps them. But by default, at least right now, there are no security guidelines that it follows. And so when people expose it to the internet, you can ask it anything you want, and it'll just give you the answer. And so if you ask it to tell you the personal details of the person registered to the OpenClaw instance, it will just do that. And if you don't understand that and you're just reliant on the AI to do the thing, then you can really cascade down into a huge failure.
Yeah. And remember, the AI is a servant mindset, meaning when you go to it and you go and you open it up, like today it'll say, "Hello, good afternoon, Rob," right? It already knows what you kind of like for dinner. It knows how you like to travel. It knows how you like to write. It knows what you want. It will tell you what you want to hear. It's like it's the perfect companion. And this is why, we want those, right? But you have to be explicit in say, hey, don't tell me what I need to hear. Tell me factual. Is this a good approach for as an HR issue or a patient problem or a financial problem or a diagnosis? And then it'll strip down the fluffy piece. But it's there to be your best buddy.
Well, it looks like that's all the questions, but I wanted to end on kind of hopefully a lighter note. But we'll see. That depends on your answers because it's my question.
Yep.
My question would be, what is the strangest example that one of you have seen of AI going awry, and how could it have been easily prevented? And sorry, I didn't ask you these questions before we even started.
Oh no. So this is an example of where I have an example where we had two parties in a conversation, and they both were using AI to read and respond to emails. And these people had an email chain that they were both on, and you could watch the rapid response of the AI going back and forth. And they had a whole conversation that was just these two AIs talking to each other, that basically they agreed on having a trip to Italy the next year, signing a contract for $3.4 million. It was this cascade of just random things, and nobody stepped in the way. Well, the people who just were attached to this, who weren't in the AI chat, were basically just watching this thing happen. And yeah, it was literally like if there was any sort of like legal ramification from that, it could have been bad, because you're really talking about two AIs where just going back and forth, trying to be friendly to each other, ended up coming up with this whole thing. Like, yeah, we're going to Italy next year. We've signed the $3.4 million contract. Everything's fine. And easily just having somebody there having one of those parties be in the middle of one of those emails and just like, nope, I'm not responding to this.
Yeah, I had a relative recently say, I haven't written an email myself in 2 years. And my first thought was, I hope you're reading what's being written. Yeah. Evidently they do, because they still have a job. But
Yep. And our example, speaking of email, I think the biggest one we've seen, and a lot of the audits we're performing, we're looking at email responses, and we've seen a lot of phishing attacks where it'll sound very very, it'll sound like your neighbor. It'll sound great. And then it'll start responding and try to hook you into like a contract or something. That's probably the most real life example that I've seen is the phishing attacks trying to get information so then can get further into your platforms and systems. Yeah. And they're very friendly and very nice, just like your friend, Bill. So,
yeah. Well, I think it looks like that does it for the questions. Rob, Matthew, I really want to thank you for your time and your expertise today. This has been terrific. And, I guess we can close by agreeing, at least the three of us agree that, AI is going to transform the safety net. It's going to continue to transform healthcare, but we really have to build it in a way that protects patient trust and preserves clinical judgment and is safe. Both from a regulatory and a patient safety standpoint. And governance is really what you have to have in place, that governance structure to scale safely. If you skip that governance structure and oversight, you're going to create tremendous exposure for your patients and for your organization.
Yeah, and I think two other things. I think there was a couple other questions that popped up quickly. I think one of them was, and I'll be quick here at the end here, about do you need to notify your patients? Well, there's before letting them know using AI. There's not a real legislation yet, but from a business standpoint and an ethical standpoint, I say yes. I tell our clients yes. Let them know. Yes, we're using AI, either intercom or it's voice recording, or we're using this, but with human oversight. I think that's key. And the other one is governance. Let's start with governance. Do you build a home without blueprints? I know I can't. Maybe there are humans out there that can build a home without a blueprint. Then you don't want to build a bot and a compliance program without a blueprint, which is governance.
Yeah, and there are some laws on the books. Colorado actually signed their Colorado AI Act, which does explicitly state that you need to alert your customer, whoever is interacting with AI, that an AI is in use, and you need to give them some minimal detail about what the AI is in use for. Yeah. So if you're using it for translation, just let them know. Hey, it's just it could be an opt-out document, or it could just be an informative document. It says we are using AI to perform transcriptions or translations for non-English speakers, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Well, after this session, give us a few days to put the video up on YouTube if you care to share it. We'll also be sending out a session summary, as we have in the past sessions, and that will also have all of Rob's information on there, as well as Matthew's, so you can reach out to them directly if you want to do so. But with this, I think this has been, a great progression through our first 4 sessions, where we started out with a broad overview and got into the tools and really got into the governance and oversight today, which is, so critical and so important for health centers. But I think the final message that I would have is, it may seem overwhelming, but it's really not a lot different than what you're currently doing with your existing oversight of your IT and your programs. It's just a different product. It's a different tool that you're using. So with that, there's also a survey link that Jessica just put in the chat. So if you want to click on that and do a survey, scan the QR code, or we'll also include that QR code in the post-session materials, I believe. With that, I thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys.
Yep, thank
Bye
you.
now.